The year was 1938. The country was struggling to shake the effects of the Great Depression. Florida was reeling from the sale of swampland billed as paradise. In the midst of this, a 27-year-old Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce publicity director named John Dillon traveled to Jacksonville, where the Florida Chamber of Commerce had scheduled a presentation on public relations. He wanted to find a way to bring credibility and ethics back to reputable Florida businesses, as he would summarize years later, a way to do our jobs better. The session on public relations was canceled, and Dillon left Jacksonville determined to form a group that would focus on positive publicity for Florida. In August 1938, a small group of chamber, attraction, and press people met in Silver Springs. In October that year, about 50 representatives from throughout the state assembled at the Tampa Terrace Hotel, and the Florida Association of Publicity Directors was born. The decade ahead proved daunting for the group. By 1941, the membership approached 100. The name changed to the Florida Publicity and Public Relations Association. World War II decimated the ranks of FPPRA. During this time, McDonald Bryan served 4 consecutive terms as association president. Dillon and a committed few went about the business of rebuilding. Early post-war projects include sanitation in public places, proper signing of Florida highways, and doing away with the expression tourists. By the end of the 1940s, membership stood at 42. A member survey determined that one of the big issues of the day was getting cows off the highways. As the 1950s began, average income was $3,210. An average new home cost $8,450. FPPRA began the decade with John Dillon organizing a series of week-long public relations short courses. This was a forerunner of our accreditation process. In 1951, members voted to change the name of the organization to the Florida Public Relations Association. A professional code of ethics was adopted in 1952, and in 1953, Dillon served his second term as president. By 1956, membership had surged to 239. That same year, FPRA's first official chapter, the Gasparilla chapter in Tampa Bay, was formed, followed by chapters in Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami, and Tallahassee. Before the decade ended, FPRA created a Public Relations Hall of Fame, which was displayed in the Florida State Chamber of Commerce in Jacksonville. It was immediately controversial for honoring many who had no connection to the practice of public relations, and would remain so until its demise 25 years later. In 1957, the association began the annual awards program that has evolved into the Golden Image Awards. 1960 opened with the promise of Camelot as the Kennedys entered the White House, but assassinations and a growing disenchantment with the Vietnam War marked the decade as one of turmoil and social upheaval. In Gainesville, University of Florida students formed the Collegiate Public Relations Association. In 1963, FPRA held its Silver Anniversary Conference in Winter Haven. Convention registration for 3 days was $20, and lodging was $12 per night. During this conference, the first Golden Image Awards were presented. Late in the 60s, membership had grown to more than 500. The decade ended with Men on the Moon and FPRA boasting 3 new chapters in Sarasota, Gainesville, and Lake Sumter. As the 70s loomed, so did gender equality, and FPRA was about to take a big step. The 70s began with a U.S. president resigning in disgrace, but FPRA just kept on trucking. Ships of the presidential gavel flew, according to John Dillon, as FPRA elected its first female president, Doris Wilkes, in 1971. Bob Dane became FPRA's first paid executive director in 1972. In 1973, the three-dimensional Golden Image Trophy was introduced. While the general public was lining up to buy gasoline in 1974, 17 FPRA members lined up to take the new Accredited Public Relations Professional exam. The CPRC exam was also introduced that year, but it would be 1976 when Jacksonville's Gene Ludlow would become the first to earn the designation. The decade welcomed the Dick Pope Polk County chapter and the Volusia County chapter. By decade's end, the association was managed by David McMullen from Tallahassee. As the 80s dawned, Post-it note glue was being invented accidentally at 3M, and a proposed merger with PRSA just didn't stick. FPRA members voted to approve the merger, but only 2 of the 4 Florida PRSA chapters voted in favor, and FPRA was left to close ranks and move on. This led incoming 1982 President Joe Curley, APR CPRC, at his installation banquet to toss a deck of cards into the air and ask those present to join him in picking up the pieces to rebuild. In August 1981, Bill Fenton, APR, became executive director, and the state office moved to Lakeland. During 1982, FPRA adopted the now familiar double quotes logo, and chapters changed their names to reflect their geographic location. In 1984, the first FPRA benchmark survey results were published as a result of the efforts of UCF professor Bob Davis, APR CPRC. Bob Gernert, APR CPRC, became the association executive director in 1986, and the state office moved to Winter Haven. The association's records were computerized. In 1987, membership topped 1,000 for the first time, and President Kathy Coleman, APR, presented the first John W. Dillon Award to founding President John Dillon. 1988 was FPRA's golden anniversary year, and the conference was held at the historic Bellevue Biltmore Hotel. President Bob Davis, APR CPRC, established the Member of the Year Award. That year, the association also named the Top Golden Image Award in honor of Dick Pope Sr., founder of Florida Cypress Gardens and a founding member of FPRA. During the 1980s, chapters were chartered in Ocala, Marion County, Brevard County, Fort Myers, Indian River, and Citrus County. In 1990, you could buy a Mustang convertible for $14,300, and the Microsoft operating system was growing to an 80% world dominance. FPRA began the decade with President Del Galloway, APR CPRC, announcing his intentions to work with PRSA and other organizations to create a universal accreditation credential. Chapter Image Award competitions began in 1992. And Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, speaks at the Counselors Network meeting. In 1994, the 20th anniversary of FPRA's accreditation certification programs was celebrated. 22% of the membership had one or more of the credentials. That same year, FPRA became the first public relations group in the nation to implement an online bulletin board system to share information via the relatively new World Wide Web. In 1995, PRSA once again floated the notion of merging the two groups. Incoming President Virginia Duffy, APR CPRC, firmly rejected the concept. In 1996, the management of the association would transfer to Steve Summers, and the state office would once again reside in Lakeland. In 1998, shortly after FPRA's 60th anniversary conference, the association lost founding president John Dillon on August 27th. Causing at least one member to eulogize, "If God didn't have a public relations director, he does now." In 1999, just 3 months before annual conference, the management of FPRA changed once again, with Sheree Key Shima, APR CPRC, and Christopher Carroll, APR CPRC, becoming the association's first co-executive directors, and the state office moved to Sarasota. As we moved into the 21st century, the predicted global computer crash never materialized. The 2000s were a time of growth for FPRA. After 10 years without chartering a professional chapter, the Northwest Florida Coast chapter formed in 2004. In 2005, FPRA and CPRC became registered trademarks. And in 2007, FPRA membership reached 1,542. This was also a time of great technological advancement. Email became the standard form of communication. Facebook started in 2004, followed by Twitter in 2006. FPRA jumped on the social media bandwagon, starting with a blog in 2005, spearheaded by Chris Gent, APR CPRC, and joining Facebook and Twitter in 2009. In 2011, inspired by social media, FPRA updated its logo. As America began to recover from the Great Recession, FPRA became ever more focused on adding value to membership. FPRA's first ICAST was held in 2012, and in 2013, the association began hosting webinars. Through ups and downs, multiple wars, natural disasters, and economic uncertainty, FPRA has remained ever at the forefront of the public relations profession, changing with the times and leading practitioners with Lieutenant Colonel John W. Dillon's promise of helping us do our jobs better.